Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Well, welcome to the March Madness edition of Shop Talk. Hope everyone is doing great. Appreciate all you guys showing up because it is the first day of the NCAA tournament, and unless if you watched the first four in over the past couple of days. So if you're a big college basketball fan like I used to be, not as much anymore. But it's that time of the year where the TV just has to come on, and we've got to have the games on in the background. So that's exactly what's happening here today, so that we can all stay tuned in to how Creighton and Louisville and High Point, all those teams are doing. So anyway, again, welcome to March's Shop Talk. If you don't know who I am Wesley Dees. I'm the CEO of Student Housing Insight. We are the host of this monthly webinar for the off-campus student housing industry, as well as P3 here in the United States. So a lot of things that we're going to be going over today. So let's go ahead and start jumping into them. But a couple of housekeeping things. One, we want this to be interactive. Would love for you guys to make comments in the chat. If you've got questions for us specifically, we want you to put that in the chat as well. Just put a Q in front of it so that we can see that and flag it so we can ask that of our panelists today. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to bring up Rich. We do not have an update from NMHC today, as those guys had a couple of conflicts today, but we do want to hit on some upcoming industry events. Rich, how are you doing?
I'm good, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We're 3 weeks out from the Interface conference, and I'm already seeing a bunch of buzz on it on LinkedIn, and excited to see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, literally 3 weeks from today. We actually get started on the Wednesday, so 3 weeks from yesterday. But yeah, it's coming up fast. We are working feverishly to get things tied up, and we're looking forward to a great event. We've got over 1,300 people coming already, and we're still 3 weeks away. So it's going to be a big crowd.
Well, hey, we put out a podcast, I guess over the weekend, that you and I recorded, just kind of going over, the history of the conference and how it's grown, and a lot of things that were on tap. But wanted to just get a quick update from you and kind of find out, what are going to be some of the highlights, and if folks aren't interested or have not registered yet, what the process for that looks like, because I know we're already sold out of hotel rooms.
Yes, unfortunately we are. We're sold out of hotel rooms at the JW. There's certainly plenty of other hotels. We're fortunate that there are a lot of hotels very close to the JW, so there's plenty of places still to stay. We're sold out of exhibit booths in the exhibit hall, which is a great thing. We still do have some spots on the third floor for companies that may want to showcase themselves a little bit. And then we've got some great sessions. We start on Wednesday with taking a look at data, which, Charlie is a session he's going to be on and be a big part of. Good way to set the table. Also a session on what's going on in international student housing, which is kind of new for us. The W Collective is going to be doing a session as well. And then also we're going to be doing kind of a new thing again, a kind of a workshop on energy and utilities and sustainability. Thursday, packed, great sessions, innovator awards that night. And then Friday, as we always do, we save some of our best stuff. Really urge people to stick around and be there on Friday. We're going to have a session on AI and just all the different ways that it's impacting student housing, we're going to have a different panel on other emerging technologies that are impacting the space. Neat panel on what's going on in tier 2 and tier 3 markets. Also looking at on-campus and P3s, different ways to grow and sustain NOI, kind of the resident experience and how a good resident experience can fuel your leasing. Also talking about some creative leasing and marketing strategies, and just basically a really strong lineup on Friday.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And Innovator Awards on Thursday night. How's that coming along with voting and everything else?
Good. We got the industry is always so awesome in terms of being receptive to being judges. So everyone we invite, vast majority of folks come back, say yes. So we've got a ton of judges for each category, which is important because we want these to be awards that are voted on by industry peers. So the judging's still going on. I think the deadline's coming up probably next week. So we still have some time on that, but it should be fun. There's a lot of great entries. I'll be very intrigued to see who comes out on top.
Oh, great. And just to let anybody that's a part of an ownership group or a operating property management firm, we have been doing a live podcast at the conference on the opening day since I think this year is our 7th year that we're doing it. And last year we started combining it with the brunch. And so we're doing that again this year. This is a private event, invite only for owners and operators. And if it is on our event page at studenthousinginsight.com, just go to the events page. And if you're an owner operator, there's a link there where you can send us a quick form. And if you have not received an invite from us, I will make sure that you get one. And again, that's going to be on the 9th starting at 10 a.m. So if you're getting in early that morning, or if you're coming in a day ahead of schedule like I am, we certainly invite you to attend that. So, and a big thanks, Rich, to you guys making some room for us at the JW so that we could do that on site and not have to do it outside the hotel grounds.
We are happy to help.
Well, great. Well, let's bring Charlie on, who will be there for the opening day as well on regarding that data session that Rich was talking about. How's that coming along, Charlie?
I had to find out from an automated email that's when I was speaking. So I feel a little unloved there, Rich.
You knew all along, Charlie. You're just playing coy. Mr. Layton will be in touch with you very soon.
Oh, I love it. That's why you called me at 9 p.m. last night. Okay, cool. Anyway, looking forward to it. I definitely, for those who haven't been to Interface that are in the audience, it's the Super Bowl. It's a great time, and there's nothing else like it here in student housing. So definitely, if you're on the fence, I don't get paid for this, so definitely go. You're missing out if you're not.
Well, Rich, again, thanks so much. If anybody wants to that hasn't registered or wants to get more information, just go to studenthousingbussiness.com. You'll see a link for the event page there to get more information. And Rich, we'll see you in a little under 3 weeks.
Thank you, Wes. Yeah, they can go to, you can also go to interfaceconferencegroup.com. If you go to studenthousingbussiness.com, you'll surely see an ad for the event. You can just click on that. And Charlie, thanks for the nice endorsement.
Always, my friend.
All right. Take care, guys.
Oh, Rich, one other thing. You guys have another webinar coming up. Was it next week?
We do. April 3rd, Conversion Logics is doing a webinar with us on how to avoid making silly mistakes when it comes to your marketing and leasing. So very good topic, very pertinent at this time of year too. So we've had a great turnout so far. Definitely encourage folks to check it out.
Great. Well, perfect. Thanks, Rich. We'll see you.
Thanks, Wes.
All right. Let's go ahead and bring up our pre-leasing panel today. Looking forward to jumping into this with these guys and see what they're experiencing across their portfolio. Hey, really quick before we go through introductions, Charlie, you want to take us through the data?
Yes.
I think this is through last Friday.
The 14th. Yes, last Friday. Context. I guess February was a very busy month for my circuit of I guess preaching the gospel of student housing. Last month, the pre-leasing metrics were behind about 3.6%. So there's been some strong, I guess, gap. I mean, it's kind of fluctuated between that 2 and 3 and 4% over the last, call it 4 or 5 months. So, from
and we talked about that on the last Shop Talk, that our expectation was that Delta is going to get a bit closer, almost regardless of what velocity ends up being, just because this time last year we started seeing such of a slowdown. So
correct. So and in context of, I guess, the banner years a couple years back, I mean, still within 4 or 5% of, I guess, the 22 and 23. And then if you go pre-22, which again was kind of the record year, it's actually 7-8% ahead. So again, we're kind of in this new norm where everything's happening faster, sooner, which I guess you close the book and reopen it really quickly. I see Joe nodding there from a faster and sooner perspective. But, ultimately, one of the biggest gains we've seen is really on the West Coast, given the fact that that's a later leasing cycle, and things have really started to take off over there. I think the Delta was about 4% last month. It's only down about, a point right now. Nationally, the Southeast is really the biggest driver. It's got the highest concentration of beds in markets across the U.S., about 1.3% behind. So again, ahead of the national average. We're really seeing the lagging from a leasing perspective is the Southwest and the Northeast, more so really the Southwest, because that includes Texas. So ultimately, I guess this time last year was kind of when that slowdown kind of started. And we'll hear from people smarter than me on kind of what's been the planning and take into account, the learnings and teachings from last year and how they're kind of putting that into play for this cycle. But, going to the next slide here, looking at the rates, again, pretty consistent across the board from a standpoint of the last few months. Average rate about $1,000 and $1,005. We're still seeing pretty strong rent growth there in the Midwest. There's, one of the lowest average rates per bed. And, if you've heard any of my previous panels, supply is a big challenge for those markets where rent per bed is so low. The economics just don't make sense. So you're, a couple markets, maybe like a Columbus, Ohio, or Champaign, Illinois, have, the rents there, but a lot of your markets across the Midwest, just, average rent beds are so low that it's hard to get something to pencil on the development side. The Southeast, again, where we're seeing a lot of that new beds coming into the markets, up about 4.5-5% there too. Again, more normalized metrics down there in the Southwest, given the fact that the velocity is behind. Same thing with the Northeast and the West as well. So nothing really jumping off the page outside of the Midwest, but again, a lot of that's due to the supply demand imbalances there and the rents per beds being so low where new development doesn't make sense.
And I will say, even month over month, I went back and looked at last month's slide, and we were at, I think, 1,001 or 1,002 on the national average per bed. So, I know it's not a lot, but it's moving, continues to move in the right direction. So
and normally, again, with the cycles and how things work, that's
what we would expect. Yeah,
what you'd expect. Nothing crazy out there. Going over here to the floor plan side, so there actually was a big change here from a month over month perspective. We're now seeing the one bedrooms are the ones that are starting to outperform. I guess, if you're going to be a stickler, about 30 basis points, the 6 bedrooms also, relatively in line. But we've seen, again, a little bit of a lagging velocity there on the studios. And then on the one bedrooms, again, you're starting to see some outperformance. This helps contextualize if you go to the next slide, where you look at the price per bed, where the one bedroom is at $1,526 currently nationally across the U.S., where the studio is actually more. So again, you're getting a bit, more square footage, I guess the enclosed bedroom there from a studio perspective, and you're paying roughly about $30 a month less, give or take, $25 a month less, give or take. So definitely something to monitor there. And then the 3 bedrooms, we've seen this trend continuing. I think last month it was like 7.2, but it's down slightly. They're about 6.8. And then the 4 bedrooms being the largest floor, I guess, from a concentration of beds, floor plan type, about 3%. That's down slightly, but we have seen a lot of operators and everyone being a little bit more proactive because of the I wouldn't say the pain that was this time last year, but ultimately going into the summer months, you don't want to have to catch the falling sword there. So floor plan level trends, again, try not to make you do math. This just puts it in a bar chart context, where again we're still strong performance, I guess, if you put it in the context of other sectors. But yeah, definitely bridging the gap there on the leasing side too. So excited to see how the rest of the cycle kind of shapes out.
Well, great. And obviously QR code there for anybody that's not a subscriber or wants more information on College House and what all they provide.
Awesome.
That's where you can find out more info. Well, with that being said, I want to go over to our panel and let's meet them. Joe, we'll start with you if you want to introduce yourself and we'll jump into it.
Perfect. I think the saying is long-time listener, first-time caller. Excited to be here and represent the 900 team members and 40,000 residents that call Coastal Ridge home. I saw a lot in the group chat, so our team has shown up. Thank you all for your support today, but appreciate the invite. Excited to speak with you all.
Great. Chelsea?
Hi, I'm Chelsea Harper. Thank you for welcoming me back again. Wes, it's good to be back on with you and Charlie. I'm Vice President for Price Company.
Yeah, if Chelsea's ever on Shop Talk, we're going to talk about Clemson. So be prepared. Melanie.
Awesome. I'm happy to participate in that Clemson chat as well. I've got 2 properties there, but I'm Melanie O'Fallon. I work with Landmark Properties. I'm the Senior Regional Director of Leasing and Marketing, and I've been working with Landmark for almost 8 years. Excited to be here.
Well, fantastic. Wait, first question I've got for you guys is this. Pre-leasing velocity seems to be a little bit back in line with industry trends that, we saw prior to the pandemic, specifically the 2018 cycle and the 2019 cycle. One, I want to know if you would agree with that statement. I know that not all of you guys are in the same position back then that you're in now, but from your observation, would you agree with that statement? And if you can, is there something that you could kind of point to the cause? Because 20 in fall of 20, or I should say the lease up for fall of 20, things were on a record pace. COVID happened, the same week 5 years ago, where everybody was told don't come back from spring break. And, obviously we saw things freeze. We saw a lot of people try to go back in the fall. We saw a lot of universities decide, we're going to go back to remote. 21, depending on what market you're in, you may have saw velocity pick up quite a bit. But certainly going into 22 and 23 and 24, we saw velocity just shoot through the roof, especially in tier 1 markets. So now it seems to be coming back and I guess getting back to normal, if that's what we want to call it. But again, if you agree with that statement, would love to kind of, what are your thoughts on, what to point to? Is it, because you're talking about a completely different cohort now than what we had in 2018 and 2019. So any ideas what the cause of that is?
I can get us kicked off. So definitely in alignment with that sentiment. Also just recently, I think yesterday, Yardi released the Yardi 200 student report from February. So that's the top 200 student markets. They're reporting similar to Charlie, where pre-lease numbers are essentially flat with last year. They have rent growth at about 3%. They are predicting the same cooling off that we saw last year. We're not quite seeing those same things. But if you look at the last 2 cycles, those were record-setting cycles in terms of pre-lease velocity and rent growth. Rent growth this year is more muted, but still good. So I think we're just now following more normalized trends. Obviously, we're paying really close attention to the cooling off that occurred around spring break in those previous years. So we're currently trending at 3% increase in our year-over-year pre-lease and about the same on the rent growth side. It's a good positive indicator. When you're ahead year-over-year, it does earn you the ability to continue increasing rents. So we feel really good about that. One really positive indication is we've had very strong leasing results these last 2 weeks, which have been really heavy spring break weeks. I can tell you, in speaking with our head of marketing, Michael Whittaky, yesterday, an interesting fact he shared across many markets, not 99%, but 100% of our web internet via mobile. And that tells us that while students are at home, they're interacting with our property websites, which was a really, really, really encouraging indication of some future good leasing in weeks to come.
Melanie, Chelsea?
Yeah. I'll add just a little bit of additional context to it. I think, Wes, you probably hit the nail on the head, but just to elaborate a little bit, everyone who was in college during the COVID years, they were entering in the fall of 2019. And those students were profoundly impacted in such a massive way. I would say the fall 2019 and fall 2020, because you had the spring breakers in 2020 who were told basically not to come back to campus, or they did come back to campus and then, campus changed their minds. So they were in and out of those dorms, which caused so much instability just in the spring. Then, I'm sitting across from the bell tower at North Carolina State University. Fall of 2020, they tried to get everybody back into the dorms and somewhat normal. And then a lot of our North Carolina schools here, had the incoming dormitories, their move-in dates, and then put them back off campus again, which caused so much uncertainty in the on-campus living situation. And so all of the students who were impacted by any of that were making sure that they had a stabilized place to stay, and that's where student housing came in. And now all of those students, well, I would say, besides the postgraduate students, almost all of them are no longer in school. So this is really kind of the first era of post-COVID students that we have now.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Although I am seeing some cautious shoppers out there as well. They're really looking to see what they can get the biggest bang for their buck and what's really going to align with their lifestyle too. Gotcha.
Charlie, just curious. I mean, you're talking to operators every single week. Any additional context to that?
I can't speak to 2018, 2019. Wasn't around then. But no, I think, ultimately there's some scars from the lack of proactive decision-making from last year. And I think people are getting smarter and understanding. And, ultimately the thing that I've heard the most is, so much of like the changes is not about, technology or thing. It's the personal touch. It's the, the face-to-face connections and, talking with the residents and prospective residents too. And I think back to the basics, again, no property, on-site experience, but that's been the general trend where they say, yeah, it's like pre-COVID again, we're having to go on campus. So, ultimately, it is different, I would say, if the norm was, I guess for around 2021 and 2020, where leasing was 50% at this time, we're still way ahead and things are happening way quicker, but, more, I guess, in a general sense, back to the basics, resident experience, and following up, I think is, the X's and O's, the blocking and tackling. So that's really the common themes that I've been hearing.
So to go back to what we talked about, what was the total amount, Charlie? About a 2% difference year over year on pre-leasing. So as we see that delta, I anticipate that it's going to get closer and closer. It's still pretty in line, with what we saw year over year. And, I wanted to ask this question based off of our prelim call that we had. Because you guys mentioned that, that everything was you had some properties that were in line with last year. Not properties, but particular markets within your portfolio that were in line with last year. But you're seeing this real shift that's kind of happening, with either product type or product class where, whatever was last to lease up last year is now leasing up first, be that cottage versus, garden style versus, class A versus class B. So wanted to, kind of ask you that question. Are there markets that you're tracking that you're seeing that?
I can
jump in first.
I can answer that from the unbiased perspective. You're definitely seeing shifts, right? I think location matters. I think ultimately, if you're not pedestrian and you can go yourself to drive to campus, what I would say, whether you're a half mile or 2 miles, like to Melanie's point, I feel like people are trying to find the best deal. Ultimately the pedestrian inventory in most of the markets is the markets absorb that new supply really well. Market that comes to mind is like Tallahassee, Florida. I think all the new developments delivered very high numbers. So I think generally speaking, you've got, different changes in, the way that people are going about and rebranding properties and being into the market, or, someone had a bad experience the previous year. You're seeing some shifts, but the one thing that I've noticed is, and we did this on our year-end report, or I guess mid-year report, we're looking at proximity to campus, like that delta between 0.5 to 1 mile and 1 mile to 2. There's a lot of strong performance from that distance to campus versus that 0.5 to 1. You still have to drive to campus, you're not pedestrian, but at the same time, you save a couple $100 a month. So that's really the one thing. Product type differs, and some markets have cottage products, some don't. But the only other thing that I would say that is consistent from the previous year is that your urban markets are definitely seeing what we call as someone who wasn't there previously, and that's the conventional supply. You don't really have that in your traditional college towns, the Athens, the Clemsons of the world, right? But a lot of times especially last year, saw a lot of the, if you didn't make a decision, in your 90 day, you had a delay with some of your FAFSA information, but 90 days prior to moving into the next school year or trying to find a place to live, there's ample options from the conventional supply in a lot of these big urban markets. So definitely something that pops out as far as performance goes in a lot of these markets.
Yeah, we'll dig into the urban thing and the conventional thing a little bit more. Don't take the question away from me, but yeah, are you guys seeing any kind of flip on the product demand side?
A little bit, but it's definitely market specific. You have to be careful about generalizing any of these, because I think this has been an abnormal year in the sense that there's not one market that you really can say is behaving exactly the same as others. Obviously, there's some trends that we can follow that have some similarities, but the two examples I have of markets that are pretty in line with pre-leasing year over year and are very healthy markets, in our opinion, are Columbia, South Carolina. They're doing fantastic. They are in line almost to a percentage point with their pre-lease from this time last year. Occupancy is up 5% overall. The school itself is working in conjunction with a private partner to deliver a P3 that's right there on campus. And because the supply is growing in a healthy fashion with enrollment there, and the university has a pretty strategic plan in place, you are still seeing the proximity to campus be the winner there. There's still the affordability for the higher end products that are down there. So, I think that that's the story for a market like Clemson, which is pretty in line. But then you have another one of my favorite markets, which is Auburn, Alabama. They're down in their pre-lease by 6%, but up in their occupancy by 2%. The market overall is occupied at 99%, and their rate is crushing it. They're almost 14% up year over year. And so if you look at a market like that, it's always been an economical housing choice for students. But the winners of this market, everyone's winning, truthfully, but the real winners are the ones who are further from campus. Mm-hmm. The ones who do have a long runway between the price point that they have and the new higher end product. And so I think if I was going to generalize two categories of markets that are pretty in line year over year, that would be my sentiments.
Gotcha. Anybody else seeing that difference?
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. To circle back to the last question, though, the fact that Charlie answered that the fundamentals still matter in student housing, absolutely love to hear that from a non-operator. Couldn't agree more. You can hustle and win in student housing. We love that fact. But I think Chelsea said it well. I don't have like a specific market, but I think another way to look at this is not necessarily by product type, but by price point. Those things certainly can go hand in hand from time to time, but this showed up a little bit in Charlie's data, and we're seeing it across our portfolio as well, where we're having overperformance in higher density floor plans like the 3s and 5s that we saw. I think it's probably two things driving this. Number one, we saw last year after the cool off, many of our competitors did slash and burn with their rate, these specific floor plans. So probably just a bit of a rate recovery is what we're seeing in the data so far this year and our results. And then similar to what Chelsea said, we believe the new generation of renters do put a lot into value. So finding the right product, but at the right price point as well. And we're seeing that in the results.
Yeah, that's what I believe too. That's pretty much my sentiment overall, is that these students and their parents have reached a ceiling in what their income is and what they're willing to pay year over year to reside off campus. So I think the best thing is finding that product and that location that's going to work for them and be able to fit within their budget year over year.
Let's go to that other question that we were kind of hinting on earlier on conventional multifamily assets, and if they're, there's always been kind of that bleed over that happens, especially in some of these markets where you end up seeing properties that, or you end up seeing the purpose-built product get full or very close to full, and then you start seeing some bleed over into conventional. You also see situations where you've got the pricing on the convention. This is typical, with your urban and metropolitan, where there was a lot of inventory on the conventional side, and they were given 2-3 free months away, and we lost students to those properties in that situation. But are you seeing where any of these conventional multifamily assets are purposely marketing to undergrads? They've always done it to grad students, but to undergrads specifically?
I believe the answer is a definitive yes. Unless you're in a campus town, basically any major city, you should assume that this is happening. I think we can offer a unique perspective here. So
you're in Columbus, so I know it happens there. I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got 23,000 student beds. We also have 17,000 conventional units. And not specific to Columbus, we see it in Lexington, Kentucky. We see it in Orlando. You heard some of the markets that Charlie mentioned. I agree with it completely. So I think Columbus is a great case study for this, though, and I can point to some actual results that occurred in this category. Before I get to that, I do want to give a quick shout out to our site teams here in Columbus. We've got a nice portfolio. Our same store results are excellent so far, outperforming our competitors. We have one additional asset that we came under our care over the last 90 days. They're already off to our races. So if you're dialed in, awesome work. Great to see that market outperformance here in our backyard at Ohio State. But the case study we have in this is we had a conventional new development that was in an affluent neighborhood 1.5 miles from campus that delivered summer of 24. We took a pretty down the fairway approach in terms of marketing and sales to get this property leased up. And somewhat organically, the rent roll ended up being about 25% student. With those results, we've obviously pivoted a little bit. That's obviously a great strategy to deploy for this asset, but it wouldn't necessarily show up as new supply in a market survey for student housing, but in effect it was. I think this is what we refer to as the shadow market. I don't know that it needs to be all that shadowy. The data is out there, but you just have to go find it. You have to work a little bit harder to understand what's going on in the market. The question then becomes, is the same person that's willing to rent a 4-bedroom, fully furnished student housing accommodation the same person that might go rent an unfurnished 2-bedroom in a conventional multifamily property? And I think in some circumstances, our data shows the answer is definitively yes. I think there's some positive news in this category. In the conventional space, we're coming off of a 24-month period where we saw record levels of new supply, and is now entering the world where it's the exact opposite. It's going to be record levels of limited supply. So I think that'll be positive and have an impact on student housing.
I saw Eric, just real quick, I saw Eric Silvestri in the chat earlier, and I
Higher.
know he lives in High Point, and I just want to say, where's it at? High Point is okay. It's halftime. Purdue's got them by 10, but they were actually leading walk.
Wow.
So, anyway, sorry, just wanted to provide an update to everybody.
We
Okay.
needed the update.
We did.
Oh man. Well, I do have a property in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and a few years ago we saw a trend of a lot of housing complexes that were changing from geared towards students to more conventional side. So that has really kind of put a hindrance on our velocity overall, because these students, again, are looking for the greatest bang for their buck and getting that free month of rent, or being able to split the rent between their friends, even though they risk having, to be stuck with the remainder of the rent if somebody decides to move out or default. They're really looking for their bang for their buck. It's a very much a price conscious market there in Murfreesboro.
The only other color I'll add is, for me, some of the markets that are most impactful is Minneapolis, Charlotte, Raleigh, all of which have seen some major new supply on the conventional multifamily side. Really for those specific markets, and Joe kind of hit on this a little bit, more of what's impacting us there, though, are the smaller floor plans. What we see to be true is that the 4s aren't necessarily going to translate to the 2s and multi. It's all of our smaller floor plans, really, in those major metros that we're competing neck and neck with. It's that with the new supply and the concessions that they're offering. And then on top of that, it's also the flexible lease terms. I think that that's probably something that we spoke about earlier this week that we haven't mentioned yet, but that is a big win, because for any student that does have any uncertainty, or, we all know that we only offer a certain amount of short-term leases, if at all. If that's what you're looking for and you're graduating or only going to be here for a semester at a time, that's where we have to look out for the conventional multifamily in our shadow markets. And shout outs to Charlie, who said he's already thinking about adding some pipeline information for some of these markets. That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. All right. Last question that I've got for you. I may ask you one more question on international students before we go into that segment. So for everybody that tuned in today to hear about that, that'll be up in just a second. But renewals should be done by now. And I'm just kind of curious, compared to last year, is your portfolio seeing more or less renewals year over year?
I can get us kicked off again. At Coastal, we are not done with renewals. Every single one of those is $200 in turn costs and some marketing dollars straight to your bottom line. So we'll be done with renewals when we're 100% pre-leased or on move-out day. That being said, I still think, in all seriousness, some runway ahead there. So on the renewal side, happy to report we're plus 2 points ahead year over year as we stand here today. A great reflection of the service we provide to our residents. As Charlie mentioned, that still matters. But that's at 34%. We ended at right around 40% last year. So there's still some opportunity there, which we'll chase aggressively, but slightly ahead year over year on the renewal side.
Great.
Yeah, I'll say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're okay. I was going to say, yeah, I would agree. I see us being ahead year over year, and I'm still seeing renewal leases specifically, coming in on our boards each and every week. So it's a really positive movement overall. And like Joe said, we're not done until we are on move-in day.
Yeah, you're never done renewing. That's always the answer. You'll renew until you have no single bed space left. I would say that there are some markets, truthfully, that we probably are a little bit behind in with renewals, but I think there is still some serious runway there. The markets I think that are most sensitive and susceptible to that is any of the markets that have seen some slowdown due to price sensitivity. Some of those students, regardless of what we do and the marketing tactics that we release, they've just been trained to wait a little bit, unfortunately, but still feel confident that there's still plenty of them out there.
Gotcha. So as we transition into talking about international students, I did have a question for you guys. One, and a lot of this, is kind of a hot and heavy topic right now, because with the new administration, there's a lot of different things that we're going to talk about that are putting some pressure on both the not the recruitment process, but with the process of getting visas done and that type of thing, and then just some other general stuff that we'll get into. But I wanted to check in with you guys and just see, hey, are you hearing anything from prospective residents who are international students that are either current students who don't know what's going to happen, if they're going to continue to stay here or not, or if they have contacted you from their home country and maybe they're waiting on that visa to be approved, or any kind of feedback that you guys are hearing. And then I also wanted to ask the question because again, 5 years ago this week we kind of started giving guarantees to folks that, hey, if school doesn't start back, or if your visa gets revoked or whatever, we will we'll cancel your lease agreement. I'm just wondering if you guys are stepping into that zone again, if you are hearing from international students.
I actually had a call today with one of my international department representatives, and she was very confident. She said these kids still have 2 more months to get their visas lined up and ready to go. So it's positive movement for us.
Good.
That's very good to hear. International student leasing tends to occur on the tail end of your lease up cycle, and I think we're entering that period now. So I'm very curious to hear from your next presenter and any feedback they have there. I mean, so far our anecdotal feedback is things seem to be on track compared to last year, which is certainly encouraging. The international students still make up about 5% of total U.S. university enrollment, so it's not a huge portion of rent rolls. There's some assets where it impacts their pre-leasing a whole lot more severely than that. But yeah, similar to Melanie, so far so good on international pre-leasing.
Well, great.
I'd agree with all of those sentiments. I think we're right on track. The students who have reached out to us really haven't seemed too terribly concerned. I think that we're probably, hopefully on the right track. And the only other sentiment that I'll share is that I do think that the colleges and universities themselves have a major incentive to do as much as they can to help this, the international student population grow as much as possible, just because a lot of these universities can't afford to take another hit, along with the following COVID and the FAFSA issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, thanks so much. For those of you that will be in Interface in 3 weeks, look forward to seeing you there. And again, thanks so much for taking out the time to be on Shop Talk this week.
This is great. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, guys. Charlie, see you later.
Adios.
All right. Well, Tanya, thank you so much for getting. Let me get back over here. Sorry about that, guys. So as you just saw, I had to pre-record this conversation with Tanya Kramer. For those of you that have been a part of Shop Talk over the past year, we had Tanya on last year to discuss, what was happening with international student recruitment and what that was going to look like from an enrollment standpoint. And we just had this whole flip that happened between Chinese students and Indian students, where now India was the biggest sender of international students. We're going to get into that. That has flipped once again, and there's not a whole lot of news out there about it, but she's tracking that data, and it was something that and there's this whole issue between fiscal or academic year versus calendar year on how this data is put out by both the State Department and Department of Education, as well as the other associations that are tracking it. So we're going to get into a little bit of that with this pre-recorded video, but I did want to talk a little bit just to tee all of this up. Here are the headlines that we've heard regarding international enrollment, over the past several weeks. We're looking at travel bans again. We saw that with the first Trump administration. And it looks like, based on some movement that's happened in the past week, we're going to see that again. And of course, that's going to cause a lot of issues. There's a lot of Ivy League colleges kind of took, they did this back in December. They did it again last week where they were telling their international students, hey, stay here. Don't go back home because travel and you getting back into the U.S. may not happen. The State Department also released, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. We'll find out eventually. But they're going to start using AI to go through that process of approving student visas. They're taking that a little bit further than what's happened in that process before, but also checking social media to see if there's any type of protest material or whatever. I guess that's what they're looking for. But you can go find that actual article is out at Inside Higher Ed. And we'll put all these links up once at shoptalk.info once that goes up in the next day or two, or once this meeting goes up in the next day or two. Another headline, I won't get into every little thing, but it's basically there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of fear mongering going on by the media. Number one, I think there is a lot of things that that are going to be challenging to international students over this next year. But I wanted to, before I jump into the interview with Tanya, I wanted to talk a little bit about another survey there's actually two surveys that have recently come out, because what's happened in regards to what you're going to see with student visas that Tanya and I are going to talk about. There's still what's the sentiment, what's the demand for students coming to the U.S. And I found this pretty enlightening. This gives you, and I'm sorry it's so small. I'll again, this will be in our slide deck when we upload everything to shoptalk.info, and you can look at it a little bit better. But students expressing that the appeal of the country had actually increased since the election. Here's just the four kind of top countries: Bangladesh up 64%, India up 48%, China, which was a shocker to me, 27%, all other countries 36%. So that sentiment is still there that students want to come. There are obviously some things that could change, that would change their mind, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Here's another one. 75% of surveyed students indicated they would recommend the U.S. for study opportunities. So that's still ranking very high. Here's the policy instability type of thing that came from this survey, where they said, look, if there's legislation that is going to, this actually isn't the right slide I wanted. Sorry. We made these this morning based off of some stuff that we found off of an article that was actually posted about 7 o'clock this morning. And so I wanted to make sure that we got to talk about it, but I'm just not as familiar with these as I am with the other stuff. So, but anyway, the conclusion comes down to this: international students continue to value U.S. education's quality and career prospects despite the political uncertainties, proving its lasting appeal as a study destination. So as much as some of this other stuff is concerning, and we know that there's going to be challenges for students, they're still wanting to come to this country. And I think that's the most important takeaway from all of this. But with that being said, let me go ahead and get into that video that we recorded yesterday with Tanya Kramer from Oxford International. Some time for us in the student housing world to talk about what's going on with international students. You joined us last year. We had a lot to talk about with India kind of becoming the number one group of students that were coming into the States. I want to follow up with you about that, because we've been talking before we started recording this, and there's some really different information that you've got. We'll jump into that. But for everybody that has not heard the podcast from last year or was part of the webinar, tell us a little bit about yourself and Oxford International and what it is that you guys do.
Sure. Thanks, Wes. Thanks for having me. And hello again for those of you I met last year. My name's Tanya Creamer, and I work for Oxford International as their VP of Higher Ed in the U.S. Oxford has been in the international ed business for over 30 years, originally starting with junior travel programs in English schools in the UK, and then eventually branching into things like higher ed partnerships, transnational education, online education. We now have a presence in 4 countries, the UK, including Scotland, Wales, and England, Canada, Australia, and the US. So we've got a very wide global recruitment team, and we work to bring international students to universities, vocational schools, and English schools in all of these locations. And as such, we do get a little bit of our finger on the pulse of the data as it is our day-to-day. Understand that was what you were sort of interested to see what the trends are right now.
Yeah. Let's jump into it. To kind of set this up a little bit, since certainly with the new administration coming in play, I've been getting a lot of questions since late January, of even before January to some extent, of, hey, Wes, we know that there were travel bans under the first Trump administration that caused a lot of issues for our international students. A lot of things have changed, since then. And now we've got another administration that's taken a very hard line on, on immigration, and the student visas kind of fall into that, under the State Department as well. Is there going to be some type of impact? I've been delaying this conversation for a while because no one really knew anything. We had the executive order that came out regarding student protesters. Those are, really students that are here. I mean, maybe there's some background check of, a student protesting in another country that could, possibly cause issues. But we're really talking about the students that are already here under that situation. I want to show really quick one other thing that has come out in the past week or so is this order from the State Department to use AI to revoke student visas. Sorry, I didn't show them inside higher ed. What this is essentially, summarizing is that they're going to use AI to begin looking at social media accounts and other things during that visa processing period, and see if that, see if anything, it red flags a student. And, in some ways, I think obviously that's a good thing, but it's something new. And so we don't know how that's going to impact things. And, we're now talking about some other travel bans that will come into play. I don't want to really get into a discussion of what may happen here and, over the next, 6 to 7 months. So much is still unknown. And I think in my conversations with you, I think what we really need to be able to look at is what's just happened in the past, 24 months, really. And we know that one thing that's really going to impact things this year, as far as processing student visas, is there's been this mandate of obviously cutting down embassy staff in a lot of those cities, and that is obviously going to slow things down, as you could imagine. So I wanted to sit down with you and really just kind of talk about, hey, what's happened in the past year? What's some of the new data? Because you get to see a lot of that stuff before it really becomes, streamlined, I guess. And we get an article from the Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed that breaks it down. So let's start with where we kind of talked about last year. Everything was really about India and how it had, kind of taken over that number one spot that China had held for so long. You showed me some information a little bit earlier that's contrary to that, and I wanted to talk about that if you don't mind.
No, sure. If you want to turn my screen on there, thank you. So I think before we talk about India and China, I think what's notable is the calendar year data was just, the fiscal year data was just totaled, which actually calculates denial rate for the visas that were applied for. And you see it doesn't look significant, but fiscal year 24 represented our highest visa denial rate of 41% in the immediate history. That was actually 14% more than 36% of the previous year. So I think when we're looking at trends and we're looking at volume and we're talking about a reduction of staff, when you see this visa denial rate, it makes you wonder how much of that is demand and how much of it is just a cultural shift in the volume of students that we're bringing in. To your point, oh, go ahead.
Just real quick, so the audience is aware, fiscal year 24 would have ended in October of 24. Or September of 24,
End of
correct?
September, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Thanks. This data, by the way, is from a colleague of mine, John Clark, who works for ETS. I had pulled the same data on my own, but he made nice charts with it, so I've stolen them to provide. You want to give credit where credit is due. So that's overall denial rate of the fiscal year, and of course we won't know. This isn't broken down by country, but when we look at the calendar year data, we can see that different story. So last time I talked to you, that was the big news. For the first time ever, India had topped China as the number one sending country of international students to the U.S. So you can see here, moving from October 14 to a 10-year period up until just recently in November, you can see the rates of India and China compared to the total international students. And although India was on top, it's now reversed. So we look at the past to see that overall increase in visa rejection. Then we look at this trend and we're able to look a little bit deeper into the actual sending countries. So when we look at the calendar year data, we can see that in 2024, we actually had a significant drop in the number of F1 visas issued to Indian students. That was a 39% drop. This chart moves backwards. So 2024 is this first set. And you can see there, that is a very significant drop in the number of those students. So when we talk about the impact this might have on student enrollment and housing, of course, I think we should expect to see some changes in demographics. I don't think you're going to see the volume of students from China that we did 10 years ago. If we go back to that chart here, you can see that it isn't that the demand from China was significantly higher. It's just that the demand from India dropped. We are still getting a lot of demand from other South Asian countries, though. Nepal, Bangladesh. In fact, Nepal was up 59% in the visas issued to students coming in 24 over 23. So that's a significant increase there as well.
Can you talk a little bit about just kind of the process? Because you guys work hand in hand with your students to, kind of walk them through that process. Can you talk a little bit about, just so everyone, is familiar with it, what's kind of the process of not getting their visa, but from the time that they say, hey, I definitely want to go to, this country, and, these are kind of my top 3 university choices. Kind of walk through the timeline with that, because in most of these countries, they're on kind of the same academic calendar where high school graduation is sometime in the spring or summer. Kind of walk us through the process of, a typical high school graduate from another country who's looking to get their student visa.
Sure. Well, it's dramatically different from country to country. The process, of course, is getting their 12th year, their final year of high school transcripts ready. Some universities allow what they call early admission, where they evaluate a student based on their grades up until their 12th grade year. But some universities do not. So that's always a part of it. Once a student chooses a university and a program and applies, they have to get what's called an I-20, which is issued by the university that shows that they have the financial means to afford to be at that university for at least a year. And then they apply for their visa and pay a fee. Now, some students choose not to pay that fee until they can be assured of an appointment. And I think what you're alluding to is a conversation we had about how dramatically the wait differs. So, for example, students in China, it's about a week to wait for a visa appointment. If you're in Calcutta, India right now, it's over 350 days. It's like 375 days. So
And that's just to get an appointment. That's just to get an appointment.
Yes, just to get an appointment. Exactly. That is not that. That is a huge commitment on the part of the student to make the decision to come and to wait that long. Now, there are ways to qualify for what they call emergency appointments, and depending upon the student's financial means and which embassy or consulate they're connected to, using the school calendar and the school admit letter and these sorts of things, they can petition for an emergency visa appointment that moves them up in the queue. But everybody can't do that, right? The part that is human are these folks that are reviewing these applications and interviewing these students. So part of that visa processing and visa wait time, it goes to the staffing. The number I shared just previously about Calcutta, for example, I don't think it takes into consideration any of the pending requested this mandate to reduce federal forces. So we may see in some regions additional wait for students getting in that line.
You've got, and I don't know if you've got it where you can share it, but before we started recording, you showed some of the rejections or percentage of rejections going all the way back to 2019. We cut out, 2020 and 2021 for obvious reasons. No one was coming because of COVID, or very few, we should say. But there was, kind of this trend, both in, I think 19, the rejection rate may have been 25 to 30%, 22, 23, it was in the mid 30s. And then this year, the rejection rate, now that doesn't say anything about demand, but the rejection rate was in the mid 40s now. And I think that was that number from January or last October?
That was fiscal year 24. I do have it on the screen now. So
gotcha,
if you look at the average denial, we were hovering most of the time around like a 35%. So you can see that in 22, 23. You can see that in 16, 17, 18. But this past year, that denial shot up to 41%. So that's the highest that it's been in the last 10 years.
And what are some of the reasons? I mean, this is before the new administration even came in. So,
right.
We can't put any blame on that. But is there anything that we can pinpoint that said this is what resulted in more rejections in the past 2 years?
No.
Or a higher rejection rate than the past 2 years? There we go.
Not really, unless you wanted, the embassy staffing has always been a concern. I attended a webinar with the Nigerian consulate, and they had such few people that they were only able to give students like a 60-second interview. And in that interview, the two most crucial things that an international student has to do in order to convince that individual that their intention to come to study in the US is sincere, and that their intention to come back home is also sincere, are things like what the source of finances are. If there's anything shady or suspect about the financial, for instance, if they said, oh, a company is sponsoring me and the company happens to be their uncle's company, there are things like that that can throw shade on a student's application. And the other is what I just mentioned. There's a keen interest in protecting our country by making sure that students who come here intend to get their degrees, and that they have a plan once they get their degrees to do something with that degree. Do they have a home to return to in their home country? Do they have a career plan that would take them somewhere else legally? It doesn't have to be back to their home country. But to answer that question as a multilingual individual, when you're nervous and a lot riding on it, and you have 60 seconds to convince them of all of these things, to articulate what about the university specifically and the degree that they're studying, that can be quite challenging. So I would throw into our hypothesis of why that is up, because of the challenge of the student to communicate the things that they're looking for. But then again, the staffing being an issue is also, if you look at the number of visas, we fielded almost 680,000 applications, F1 applications last year, slightly down from 23, but up over 22. And so if staff has been reduced along the way when we had lower numbers, you can see now that that same number of staff isn't adequate to field that number of applications.
Yeah. So, the things that we know that are in place right now, for example, with the State Department using AI to go through that process, does it find more things to show concern and revoke a student, or does it actually find better data? I mean, that's yet to be seen, but the key thing seems to be that could have a really big impact would probably be the staffing, because I think you said Calcutta was 350 days. And if that's related to current staffing, I can't imagine a 10% reduction is, I don't even know how it's possible, but I don't know all the facts. I don't know that anybody does, quite honestly, but.
Well, to have a Pollyanna attitude about it, though, how different industries are harnessing the power of AI, this has an opportunity to perhaps expedite the processing of visas. I think we all fear that it would reject students categorically who might not deserve to be rejected. But if they're processing them faster, there may be a win there as well.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I think, there's other things that the administration has put out that are actually, from folks I've talked to, would, give a lot of optimism that there's going to be, even higher demand. So, a lot left to be seen, and I'll keep sending you emails asking if you've got any new updates this year. But I appreciate so much the time that you've given us, and I hope that there's more clear information that everybody gets moving forward. But that's my prayer, my hope. If you'll get it, I don't know.
Yeah, I think what I always try to keep my eyes on is that the demand for quality U.S. education from the world has always increased. It may go up and down, similar to the stock market, but at the end of the day, it recovers. And so whether it's next month, whether it's next year, I think we're going to continue to see students that want to come to the U.S. to study and want to live near campus when they do it.
Yeah. Well, Tanya, again, thanks so much. And we'll make sure that we've got your information out there for anybody that may want to contact you. And you guys are actually involved a little bit in preparing housing for students as well, correct? For some of your students.
Yeah, we work with our university partners to select the on-campus options that are suitable for international students.
Gotcha.
And then when the housing is in shortage, we look outside and nearby to make sure we can find places that are safe, that offer, as I mentioned last year, like the roommate matching, the furnished, there's a lot of things that make housing more appealing to an international student, depending upon their demographic. But one that continues to rise is the economics of it all. So.
Great.
Yeah, if you got any questions, send them to me.
All right. Thanks, Tanya.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Bye.
All right. Again, sorry we had to pre-record that, and there wasn't the ability for you guys to ask questions to Tanya, but she's certainly willing to take your emails. So we'll put that information up on the website when we post the slide deck. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I know it went a little extra long today. And we've still got quite a few people here. So thanks so much for that. Next Shop Talk is going to be, we've got to delay it to it's almost the third week of April. We try to do this on the second Thursday of each month, but because of interface, we're going to be doing it on Thursday, April 17th. So mark your calendars. We will have that invite and everything up at shoptalk.info at the end of the month. So make sure that you go there. If we've brought you any type of value today, other than updating a couple of the scores with March Madness, I hope you will certainly tell your colleagues about ShopTalk and have them register. They can go to shoptalk.info, and there's a registration button that will give them all the email invites so that they will not miss a Shop Talk in the future, as well as some of the other stuff that we do. So thanks so much for those of you that will be at Interface next month. I'll see you in a few weeks. Take care, everyone.